Welcome viewers to the Inside Interviews podcast, which is a unique series of academic discussions where we take a deeper dive into a variety of unique topics. After the episode, be sure to check us out on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform or our website, shiaresearch.ca. Today, we are pleased to have Dr. Sayyid Ammar Nakshawani with us. He's an Islamic scholar and lecturer, and is a founder, president of the Prophet Muhammad Institute for Islamic Studies. Having completed his undergraduate studies at the University College London and his PhD at the University of Exeter, he went on to study at the Islamic Seminary in Damascus. Dr. Nakshawani served as the visiting scholar at the Center of Islamic Studies, University of Cambridge, then migrated to the United States, where he was the inaugural holder of the Imam Ali Chair for Shi'a Studies and Dialogue amongst Islamic Legal Schools at the Hartford Seminary. Furthermore, Dr. Nakshawani held the position of associate at the Harvard Kennedy School's Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs. Dr. Nakshawani was recognized as one of the world's 500 most influential Muslims. Thank you, Dr. Nakshawani, for joining us today.
Thank you, Dr. / Professor / Shaykh Vinay Katie.
Thank you.
God bless.
And I should mention, we are broadcasting from our office here at the University of Toronto. So welcome to everyone to our building and our offices here at the university. Let's get into it, Dr. Nakshawani. Tell us a little bit about your intellectual journey to Islamic history. Clearly, you are very interested in it. You've written on the subject. You've spoken for over 20 years on the subject of Islamic history, historiography. Tell us a little bit about your intellectual journey.
Well, first and foremost, thank you for the invite. Yeah. And I'm super proud of the work that the Shia Research Institute is doing. And I think it's just going to go from strength to strength. On a personal level, I suppose in one way I'm fortunate that I come from a scholarly background from both sides of my family. From my parents' side, you have the Nakshawani family, the Irawani family, the Borojordi family, amongst others who were all very much involved in both the seminaries of Najaf and Qom. And I try not to forget about that because the sacrifices that they had made in ensuring that the family was raised with the love of reading, with the love of writing, with the love of teaching. My mother, God bless her, from a young age, she was instrumental in developing a fervor and a love for Islamic history. And the man who we're discussing in this particular podcast is somebody whose lectures my mother would attend in Kuwait in the early 80s while she was pregnant with me. And so always I'm indebted to my parents for that love for Islamic knowledge generally, history in particular. And ironically, I don't start off on that path. Most people might start off with a bachelor's in Islamic studies and a master's in Islamic studies. And here I am at the age of 19, certain that I'm going to be a lawyer. And really it's that university where after a trip to Medina and looking at the relics and the ruins in Medina, especially the famous Baqi' cemetery, that a sort of epiphany overcomes a person, a moment where you ask yourself, what do I know about these grand personalities, these saints, awliya or imams as some would call them, such as Hassan bin Ali, Zayn al-Abidin, Muhammad al-Baqir, Ja'far al-Sadiq, who are buried in that Baqi' cemetery. And I returned to London, and here I am at this bookstore in London called Alif International. Al-Hajj Murtada Bandali has this bookstore in London, and I'm just enthralled by reading about Imam al-Hassan and the Umayyads, and Imam Zayn al-Abidin, Muhammad al-Baqir, Ja'far al-Sadiq, and then also moving from there to reading Tijani's famous works. Then I was guided and to be with the truthful ones and ask those who know, and so on and so forth. And you're young, but you're really looking at polemics mixed with history. And I had the opportunity to go to the Islamic College for Advanced Studies to do my master's. And I decided to do my master's on the Umayyad leadership, Muawiyah in particular, under the supervision of Dr. Jasim Hussein. That's where we, of course, come together at that time.
Years back, 2 decades ago.
Years back. I don't know how old that makes us look. But we're talking 05.
Yeah, 20 years ago.
Dr. Jasim, he's a great mind. He has the famous work, The Occultation of the 12th Imam in early Shi'ism, which I think he did under Montgomery Watt.
Yeah.
But I've got also great teachers who, at the same time, and again, it just fits in with the Waeli narrative, and that is, I've got the academic journey beginning, but I've also got the Hawzawi, the more traditional seminary journey, and here I'm studying under Shaykh Ahmad al-Waeli, Shaykh Muhammad Sa'id Bahmanpour, Shaykh Ilmi, Professor Izzati, Professor Khalil Tusi. You remember a lot of these names. And of course, no way can we forget Ayatollah Sayyid Fadl Milani. And to study, usul al-fiqh and ironically, the other subjects that all fitted in so well in my journey later on. And I don't want to go even further, but to say then from there, I went to do my PhD under, Professor Sajjad Rizvi and Professor Robert Gleave and the dearly departed Professor Clifford Edmund Bosworth.
The
epic CE Bosworth.
Yeah.
And Bosworth has a major effect on even the way that I present my analysis. From there, I go to the Islamic Seminary in Damascus. And again, it's similar to Shaykh al-Waeli's development, where he's juggling between seminary, academic, seminary. That generally is the journey. There's a few pitfalls along the way as we all go through, but I suppose that love of history really develops alongside that journey.
Yeah. Wonderful. Speaking of history, let's dive into it. Since we're going to be focusing on contemporary Shi'ism with you today, 50s to the 80s, a very tumultuous period for Shi'ism, for the whole Islamic world. Before we get to Shaykh Ahmad al-Waeli, set the stage for us. What was going on from his upbringing, that period? Because I think we need to understand context of what's going on in the Arab world at this time. What are the major influences? Give us a little bird's eye view of the Arab world and particularly the Shi'i world at this time.
Shaykh Ahmad al-Waeli is born in 1928, 17th of Rabi' al-Awwal. So he's born on the birth, according to certain traditions and narratives, of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him and his family. He's born in the holy city of Najaf. Najaf is the bastion of the knowledge and the sciences and the clergy and traditional Shi'ism. Shaykh al-Tusi establishes this center of learning, and you've got the famous shrine which encompasses not only Adam and Noah, but of course the first Shia Imam, Ali ibn Abi Talib, fourth caliph of the Muslim population. So in 1928, he's born in an environment known for its history of religious teaching, but he's living alongside people who are facing a very turbulent time, trying to come to terms with a number of changes that are happening for Muslims around the world. Firstly, you've got the caliphate, which is now abolished.
Fallen, the Ottomans.
The Ottomans. And that's only a few years before Waeli is born. What then happens is the abolishment leads certain countries to go towards secularism, others towards Arab nationalism, others socialism, others anti-imperialism. So all of these are at loggerheads with each other. There is overlap, of course, between some of these. And Iraq is full of intellectuals in this period. And the intellectual, in some cases, doesn't feel that the clergy are necessarily meeting the demands of the time.
Got it.
You've got great scholars alive at the time from the Kashf al-Ghata family, from the Hakim family. Just to give a couple of examples, but you don't necessarily have anyone who's emerging at that time who is writing or publishing other than predominantly jurisprudential works. Now, if I've got Marx and Engels and their works, and what's a huge communism drive happening at the time, a person goes to the USSR and you're looking at the works being published, and it goes across Europe, communism all the way to China. 1 minute, you look at a communist movement in Bucharest, and the next minute you're seeing it even affect the Middle East. So now all of these conflicting views means that the ideologies seem more intellectual than what Islam has to offer. Ali Shariati alludes to this in his writings, where he begins to talk about a black Shi'ism, a red Shi'ism, a Shi'ism that maybe needs to reassess itself. Mm-hmm. Are you more concerned with telling people about purity laws, which are important in their place, but how are you stopping the drive of atheism? Najaf has families of the most prestigious surnames. Their sons are leaving religion. Their sons are saying, listen, I listen to the lectures and this is important for Waeli especially. Muharram's got people who come and honor the legacy of Imam al-Hussein, grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon his family. And there was an evolution about how a Muharram Majlis would take place. But people were reaching the stage where when they go to listen to a lecture in the 30s or 40s in Iraq, it's just like, you know what, let's just get us to cry. I'm not really going to learn anything from this guy. There was no concept that the lecture was even going to be of substance. If there was going to be something of substance, it might be at the Arab Communist Club,
Yeah.
And it might be poets who are producing diwans. You might find maybe more intellectual discussions in the University of Baghdad by secular-minded personalities than by the religious. It was unheard of even for someone to be amongst Najaf's elite who's gonna necessarily graduate from a University of Baghdad College of Law, for example, or Department of Law. The Najafi scholar is gonna be in an alleyway in a school in Najaf, doing what they do best, and that is studying works from the medieval period or from the previous 50 years, 100 years, and they'll sit in small classes and they'll continue producing scholars who have got nothing to do with what society is going through. This is the environment in which Shaykh al-Waeli grows up. And all of a sudden, a turning point takes place. And that is a group of scholars who Waeli continues to revere throughout his life emerge in the 30s seeking to address this issue. And that's Shaykh Muhammad Rada al-Muzaffar, Shaykh Muhammad Taqi al-Jawahiri, and Sayyid Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr. Now, there's others I can name, of course. It's not right to forget Murtada al-Askari, Muhammad Hussein al-Allah, and so on and so forth, who were involved in this movement. But the environment that Shaykh al-Waeli now grows up in is an environment where a couple of these scholars are like, listen, if we don't meet the needs of philosophy, concepts of existence, if we don't meet the needs of the community in replying to materialist ideologies, Islam's place in economics, Islam's place in politics, Islam's place in all of these, then we're going to lose a whole generation. And so therefore, to round off what I know is a major bird's eye view, he is in a way fortunate that he has these three grand scholars who have picked up on the need to change things up a little bit in Najaf. Yeah.
Amazing. So Shaykh Ahmad al-Waeli goes on to become arguably one of the most formative and influential orators in contemporary Iraqi history. What were some of the what was special about him? You know, give us an insight. Like, what made him? Why are we still remembering him? It's 2025. Why him? There's thousands, if not tens of thousands, perhaps, of orators in Iraq, between dhakirin and ulama. What makes this individual so unique?
There's so many factors to what makes him the great personality that he becomes. I think first and foremost, he has this unbelievable passion to learn from all.
Okay.
Sometimes there are personalities who will say, I only learn from this particular type of personality, this particular look of personality. I'm not going to go to Baghdad and study. I'm not going to travel to Cairo and study. I'm going to study in Najaf. I pick up the points that I need, and that's it. His relentless drive to learn means that, on the one hand, he is in the traditional seminary. He has fantastic teachers who he mentions a lot. One of them, my grandfather, Ayatollah Muhammad Taqi al-Irawani. Another, you have Ayatollah, of course, Shaykh Muhammad Rida al-Muzaffar. Another, Ayatollah al-Sayyid al-Marhum Muhammad Taqi al-Hakim.
Yes.
These are influential in shaping his traditional studies. Because what happened with Jami'at Muntada al-Nashr is where he has this mix of Hawzawi traditional Shi'i seminarian training, but with teachers who are willing to look at contemporary philosophy, contemporary
So it's like
adabiyat.
It's kind of like a hybrid system?
Hybrid system. A hybrid system that, of course, causes controversy. Because people are like, what are you doing? Najaf doesn't allow you to be studying, you know, the thoughts of atheist thinkers, atheist philosophers. Shaykh Muhammad Rida al-Muzaffar got a lot of stick for Jami'at, or for the Kulliyah of the Fiqh that is Jami'at Muntada al-Nashr.
And which is now in the University of Kufa.
University of Kufa, but
now.
Correct. But he got a lot of backlash. You people who are graduating from there are not real Hawzawis. You people are discussing the Palestinian cause as a lesson, sociology, psychology. We study fiqh, usul al-fiqh, nahu, sarf, you know, syntax, morphology. We study, hadith sciences and so on. Okay, we'll branch out to history and Quranic exegesis. But for you guys to actually now be also doing what were seen as foreign sciences to the Hausa. So Waeli emerges in an environment which shapes his character where he's adaptable. If you want Waeli to lecture to the highest ambassador in a country, they'll be in his lectures. And if you want him to lecture where a 16-year-old Iraqi boy in a shop will relate to him, and you can actually prove this today, that today if you ask your average young Iraqi 16, 18-year-old who's the best Arabic orator who's ever sat on the minbar of Imam al-Hussein, the pulpit of Imam al-Hussein al-Muharram, he'll say to you, Ahmad al-Waeli. Ahmad al-Waeli died 22 years ago.
My own mother-in-law told me the same thing.
There you go. So, and when you say to me, your mother-in-law, your father-in-law,
They still remember him and they talk about him.
would you agree as well that in some cases some are from a very traditional background, the other ones from a very, modern background, but they can still relate to Waeli because Waeli can combine the two in one lecture.
I agree.
Waeli, in one lecture, can move to talk about Ma'arri and Mutanabbi.
Yeah.
On a pulpit, he's discussing...
So he was an adib as well.
Adib, of course. The Diwan of Waeli. There's volume upon volume. He has this thing in his lectures when he says, and as one of the poets says, that means it's his poem. But he never says, I said. You know?
Got it. Yeah.
For example, يقول أحد الشعراء وكما يقول شعر. For example, that is his poetry. But that freedom to be a poet, that freedom to discuss Ma'arri and Mutanabbi, knowing that they've got certain moments where they can really,
Of course, yeah.
you know, the at the same time, the ability to bring up an usuli qaida or qawa'id fiqhiyya on mimbar at ease, the ability to discuss non-Shia thought, because he went to study in Cairo. His first thesis originally was on prison laws in Islam.
Wow.
Yeah. His second thesis was on the wage of the employee.
Yeah.
Waeli would always refer to how he approached Ayatollah Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr discussing this issue with him. And he always alludes to how broken he is that we lost Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr. But he's also got this major reference for Ayatollah al-Khou'i. And he has this story which he once mentions in a lecture where he's like, I was sitting between Khou'i and Sadr and I didn't understand what they were saying in their discussion that went way above my pay grade. So he can easily sit with these ulama, but he can also very easily be in the Nile, in a caf by the River Nile, where he spends a number of his years outside of Iraq in the 70s, late 60s onto the 70s, where he ends up also having a diploma from the University of Cairo in economics.
Another subject.
What you have to remember is that in traditional Shi'ism, a person who was sitting on the mimbar was known as a Rosa Khun, or today is known as a Dakir.
Dakir, yeah.
The whole idea of a Rosa Khun, Rosa Til Kashfi, he recites the Masa'ib or the eulogies or the lamentations on Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. You're not going to expect him to quote Ma'arri, Mutanabbi.
No, it's beyond their scope.
It's beyond the scope. He's not going to examine Sharif al-Radi.
No.
Here you've got someone who combines everything with an unbelievable charisma, with an unbelievable charm. And that is what makes him, according to some, Ayatollah al-Khomeini, Ayatollah al-Khou'i have certain titles that they give him, such as al-Hawza al-Mutanaqqila. The seminary that keeps moving.
The mobile Hawza.
Mobile Hawza.
Yeah.
The mobile Hawza means wherever he sits, this is a Hawza teaching you a majlis, teaching you lessons. I always tell people, if you learn Arabic, you learn it for the Quran. But if you can, just get a flavor of Waeli's lectures. So I think these factors all play a role. He is relentless in his drive to learn. Relentless in his drive to learn about that who he or what he believes in and that which he disagrees in, but is aware. And you couple that, he's then addressing, as Ayatollah Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr begins to address in our philosophy, our economy, as Allama Tabatabai begins to address in his works looking at materialist ideologies. So you've got this movement that's now happening. And this movement is saying that we're not just going to go up there and make you cry. We want you to understand why you're a Muslim, but what the literature is, and that you shouldn't be ashamed of what you're following, and so on and so forth.
Wow. Now, how does this, everything you've mentioned, this interdisciplinary learning, his Hausa education, his seeming charisma, interact or come at loggerheads with the political situation in Iraq?
Yeah, well, the Ba'athist regime, of course, part of their policies is that they have a major problem with religion in public. Whether this Ba'athist policy, whether it's Iraq or transcends to Syria or wherever, is that we don't want a public display of religion, religious symbols. They know that this could arouse a revolution, and so Abdul Karim Qasim, you've got him there, and you've got this movement with Jamal Abdel Nasser and others.
In Egypt.
In Egypt, and they don't really necessarily want religion at the forefront. There's pan-Arab nationalism, Uruba, and that means that to them, the Shia in some cases are going to be looked at as Iranian stooges. The Hawzas, of course.
This is even pre-revolution? Of course, way pre-revolution.
Pre-revolution. Pre-revolution. You've got two elements that cause them major problems. One is the Da'wah party's emergence.
Oh, okay.
And the other is this constant suspicion of the fact that you're not proud of Iraq, you place Shi'ism above Iraq. And if you're a proud Iraqi, we'll respect you.
Yeah.
But if you're an Azari, my grandfather, Ayatollah al-Khoi, Ayatollah Khalkhali, Ayatollah Zanjani, Ayatollah Milani were all Azari Turks.
Okay.
Now, Ayatollah al-Khoi, his Arabic would be with a clear Persian twang, whereas my grandfather's Arabic is as Najafi as it gets. But they're all being put in the same circle, the same label, and that is that you guys prefer Iran over anyone else. So on the one hand, the Ba'athists are looking at these and saying, deport, deport, deport.
Yeah.
On the other hand, they want the mimbar, the pulpit of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, to either be a place for propaganda for the Ba'athist party, or to be a place which is shut down completely.
Got it.
Shaykh al-Waeli, begins to lecture abroad in the 40s. So Shaykh al-Waeli, at the age of 21, begins his first lecture in Kuwait. So if you look at the progress of Waeli, he lectures in Najaf. In the early days, there were these katatib.
Okay.
And these would be places where you go and you learn about how to do majalis for kids.
Yeah.
And some people have them as mahfals in certain countries.
Yeah.
You go there, you do masa'ib in a certain...
Yeah.
And then from there, he does the muqaddama of a majlis. So normally you would do the intro to the main lecture.
Yeah.
Then from there, he lectures in Najaf. In those days, the two main centers where you'd have a huge majlis would be Baghdad and Basra. And in Baghdad, he lectures in well-known Husayniyat. One of the most famous ones in the Karrada area, or going towards the Kadhmiya area of Baghdad, you got Husayniyat Abdul Rasul Ali. Waeli is lecturing there and people are attending in thousands. In Karbala, thousands. He then moves from there in the late 40s to lecture in Kuwait. In 1949, he gives his first lecture in Kuwait. And he continues to lecture in Kuwait until his last days. So he spent over 50 years giving majalis in Kuwait. And I think Kuwait, sometimes people forget that it may not be a Shia majority, but they helped
There's a very serious Shia presence there.
Of course. Shia, and it became even more serious because of his lectures, because his lectures were known for being very reconciliatory.
Okay.
There was never sectarianism. And he helps Shi'ism to have a good place in Kuwait, where later speakers who speak in Kuwait, such as Sheikh Fadl al-Maliki, Sheikh Baqir al-Maqdisi, Sheikh Abdul Hamid al-Muhajir, Sheikh al-Shahrudi. These people become the main, Said Jasim al-Tawar Jawi.
Yeah.
These are the main speakers who, if it was Waeli who laid, Waeli and Said Jawad Shubbar.
They laid the foundation.
They laid the foundation. Said Jawad Shubbar was from the Shubbar illustrious family of Najaf, killed by the Ba'athist regime. Waeli survives the Ba'athist regime by having to leave all of a sudden Iraq at the end of the 70s. In files that were searched post-2003, there are so many documents, Ba'athists abroad writing about Waeli's lectures.
Fascinating.
To the extent that the Ba'athist government decided that they had to promote Sunni professors and Sunni academics to counter one man who, like Abraham, was an ummah by himself.
Yeah.
They don't say, let's counter, with all my respect to Sheikh al-Muhajir, Sheikh al-Maliki, Sheikh al-Shahrudi, Sheikh al-Maqdisi, Sheikh Jabir Aghai, Sheikh Yusuf Dexon, who all become the most prominent names of the Arabic pulpit in the 70s and 80s. Their main concern is, you got to counter Waeli. And that's where he decides to leave Iraq, and it's hard for him. And where does he go to live? Syria. Waeli lives for the last years of his life, 24 years, to the extent he becomes a Syrian citizen, Hafid al-Assad grants him a passport in respect of him. And he lectures all across the Middle East. If you went to Sheikh Zayed in the Emirates, Waeli has lectured for him. Sheikh Sabah, Kuwait, Waeli has lectured for him. Hafid al-Assad, Syria, Waeli has lectured for him. I have met people who have converted towards Ja'fari thought because of Waeli, because of his lectures. I've met people who did not become Shia, but were so in awe of his lectures that they just mesmerized by the content. So the Ba'athists realize that he's super influential and they need to hurt him. And that's where he goes through probably some of the hardest parts of his life, because his son, Muhammad Hussein, if I'm not mistaken was his name, was killed by the Ba'athists for no crime. And the Ba'athists killed many, for no crime.
Yeah.
But that he's related to Waeli. Some believe that it was a case of mistaken identity. Others said no. And that takes a major toll. He gets to Ali al-Akbar, son of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam's eulogy and lamentation at the end of the traditional Shi'i pulpit lecture, and you can tell it breaks him. And there is one lecture of his, which I remember, where he is like, this world is full of trial. And he goes that, me, my sisters, in-laws, they do wonder about where their boys are.
أسأل الله أن يرد على هالأمهات الملهوفة أسراها بحق محمد وآل محمد، لأن أنا عايش المشكلة، أنا عندي 3 بالسجن. نعم عايشة. والله ودي أني أضع لي الآن شمعة، كنت أتوق في قرارة نفسي أضع لي شمعة للولد وأزوجه مثل باقي الناس، أنا أتوق إلى هذا، ولكن الحمد لله على كل حال. أسأل الله أن يرد للأمهات لهفتهن. أنا عندي فعلا 3 ذني بالبيت يقعدن ينوحن، أم الولد زين، ورضيعتي أيضا ابنها، وابن خالي أيضا، و3 يجيني الخبر أنه على هالهيئة. هذا صح.
Because of the Iraqi regime.
Yeah. Until his dying days, he was wondering whether his son was alive.
Because he was exiled.
Because he's exiled.
But his family was still within Iraq.
Yes, he does go on, of course. Waeli marries again, while in Syria. But his young ones who then grow are in Iraq. I was fortunate that, not only was he obviously close to my grandfather, with my grandfather being, pretty much the representative of Ayatollah Khoui's office in Najaf, but his son Samir and my father were close friends. And so what Waeli does is that while he lives in Syria, he also will come and, for example, in the summer, stay in London. And he lives near Hyde Park in London. And looking out from a huge window overlooking the park, he would prepare his lectures. And it goes to show you that part of him is the scholar on the traditional, part of him is that person who, wants to also be a bit reclusive when he needs to be. It's not easy to prepare all those lectures.
Yeah.
And he wants his own quiet time in Europe, which is very untraditional. Normally it's a case of my quiet time.
So he even traveled to Europe?
Yeah, so he bought a property in London, in central London, and this is something I'll say which is personal. My father was involved in the transaction for the property, and my father said to me that shortly afterwards, he said to him, sell it. He said to him, why? He said, the service charge for the flat that I'm paying, the common charges, there's people out there starving, and I can't justify being here for a couple of months of the year while, there are others out there who can't afford. And
Shaykh Waeli.
Yes. And one thing about him that he was known for is philanthropy. People still attest until today to the number of families in Syria, in Iran, in Iraq, that Waeli. Because the more prominent he becomes, of course, the more gifts, the more wealthier families as part of the course, really, that are going to invite you to lecture for their households. And he begins to distribute like no other. He asks, he has the head of his office in Syria, Sayyid Mudar al-Hilu. Said Mudar al-Hilu was the head of his office, and he would say to him, listen, find out how many Iraqi families there are who are in need, and go and distribute as much as you can.
Did he ever get into trouble? Any controversies?
Yeah, of course. Which one of us doesn't get into controversies?
Yeah, everyone does.
I always say, when people ask me, about some of my controversies, I say, a restaurant that serves 5 dishes is not going to have many complaints. But if you serve 1,000 dishes, there's always going to be a couple of recipes you don't agree with or don't go down too well. We're talking now about the man who has pretty much the most majalis in Shi'ism. And
he was prolific.
And if you think of the controversies, arguably his most controversial lecture is when he lambasts the julus, or the public procession of mourning that's done on the streets in the Western world. And
why?
So he's like, this is what Imam al-Hussein died for? So you dress up somebody as Qasim on a horse in the middle of central London. And then he said, if it was up to me, I'd bury all of you alive. And he absolutely loses it. As the Iraqi fuse, if it goes on mimbar,
it can be dangerous.
When we start seeing red.
Yeah.
And he's like, this is nonsense. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam died for you guys to go out on the streets and behave like this. Now, he had his perspective on the fact that these processions, are they really beneficial? Being in the middle of a road, causing traffic, people don't understand what's going on. And in some cases, people attacked him viciously for that. And then he has other moments where it's interesting. In one interview, he discusses the caliphs and the wife of the Prophet, and he says, after saying their names, may God be pleased with them. And there was always a question mark, similar to, I think, Sayyid Muhammad Hussein Fadlallah in one interview.
Yeah.
There was always a question mark, well, how could you say that? And on the one hand, in his poetry, in his lectures, he dissociates himself.
So obvious.
It's so obvious how he dissociates himself from such personalities who, of course, in Shi'i thought are not as revered as they would be in non-Shia thought. But he's on television. And there was always one thing he was super careful about, and that was, we aren't in an easy position in the Middle East. And we don't need to go towards a sectarian line. As I said, I believe that his poetry is extremely sectarian. But with his poetry, because it's fusha to the highest degree, I don't think anyone can really clock it. So there's a controversy there as well. But if you notice with me right now, I'm finding it hard to come up with Waeli controversies.
Yeah.
And that is testimony to the profoundness of the man. In some cases, people would get angry. Why does he say, sit the child down? And, I've been in a situation similar where you're giving this lecture and there's children moving, and now your concentration is in no man's land, but nobody's doing anything about it. And it's interesting that there was once that he's talking, the ladies were upstairs in the mosque and the men are downstairs. Iraqi majalis are in this, it's not completely separate. Sometimes you can have a mezzanine. And he's talking and the ladies start to chat and he's just like, I don't know why God created women sometimes. And all of a sudden, yeah. And we were told as youngsters,
like on a hot mic.
Yeah. And there might be a little, rare smile from him as he says it, as you might have somebody who, it's a tongue-in-cheek comment. But the seriousness of Waeli is, look, means you don't know if it's tongue-in-cheek, and you just hold back. And our children would actually, or our parents would tell us as kids, before you go to his lecture, go to the bathroom, please. Okay, I went to the bathroom. No, go again. Because he'll call you out. He expected complete discipline in the lecture. There was no movement. And to some that becomes controversial, because it's just like, well, why aren't you more soft? And so on. To him, it's like, you're coming to God's house. Yeah. You're coming to a university. There's no university professor who's going to tolerate, people just chatting at the back and moving as they please. And so why should we tolerate this on the pulpit?
Yeah.
But all in all, when you're loved by non-Shia and you're loved by non-Muslims, it shows your controversies are far and few between.
What was he like off the minbar?
Off the minbar, as jovial as you'll get. Yeah. And I was fortunate to, and imagine how small the world is, that when he'd come and visit my dad in London, he'd bring me a gift. And I wouldn't even have a clue who this old man is who's giving me a gift. And little do I know that this man is the most famous reciter of Imam Hussein's majalis there'll ever be. And extremely known for, having banter, but in a particular circle.
Of course.
But if you are part of that circle, and you'll see sometimes in his lectures that, I remember one incident, he says in Hajj, he meets someone, I think from Senegal or something, and he says to him, the person says to him, you're Shia. He's like, yeah. He's like, oh, I heard that Caliph Harun ibn Mutawakkil, son of Ali, son of Umar, was against you guys or something. And Waeli, he says it and he cracks up. He's like saying, look how ignorant the person is, that he can't even get the Caliph names right, and he's attacking our beliefs, and the crowd will crack up. Or once he'll say something along the lines of, you've got Hur al-Ain, or the virgins in heaven, as they allude to. If you're going to get stuck with that missus you've had in dunya, then what was the point of heaven? And so he's got these moments, and the crowd will laugh straight away, because it's a serious personality, but he's throwing jokes in, and you're just like, oh my God, that's just lighten the mood. And I do believe that sets him apart.
يوم من الأيام رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله قال لأصحابه من كان منكم راض عن زوجته نعم فليبقى قاعدا ومن لم يرضى فليقم. يقول قاموا كلهم إلا واحد ظل. قال الحمد لله هم زين واحد بالأمة عنده. قال لا يا رسول الله كسرت رجلي. المهم أن على أي حال.
Because he mixes his very serious content with a degree of levity at the same time.
Yeah, and I don't think, if you look at the contemporary Arabic lecturers, Ayatollah Munir al-Khabbaz, for example, or Sheikh Ja'far al-Ibrahimi, or Sheikh Zaman al-Hasnawi, Sayyid Ali al-Talqani. These are names in Iraq you'll hear about. Sheikh Salam al-Askari. I don't see many who've got charisma and charm where they can suddenly switch with a little humorous comment and go back to their topic. They're well researched, they're working hard, and so on and so forth. But he has this ability where he's so dominant. What sets him apart is the oneness of topic. Many people were always saying most Maulanas are jumping topics when they lecture. Waeli says to you an ayah at the beginning of his lecture, a verse. Or in smaller cases, a hadith sometimes, or a khutbah. More often than not, it's a verse.
Yeah.
He breaks down the verse into three. He will not go into any other direction. So for example, if he begins the lecture by saying, بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. He'll then say, the verse in question, or the surah in question, can be broken down into three parts. The first part I'd like to discuss is والعصر. Al-asr refers to a concept of squeezing. So he goes like that. I, in my majalis, developed a structure of oneness of topic But I very rarely break an ayah into 3. I break a topic into 5 or 6. So you've got to really focus quite well in a Waeli lecture. Because if the ayah that he picks, and that's how brilliant he is, he can pick an extremely, on the one hand I'd say difficult verse, on the other hand I'd say not often quoted verse. And he'll break it down for you in such a profound way that by the end you're in awe of how he's dissected that particular verse. I've got so many lectures in my mind where I remember in my own development when when I first started lecturing, I wasn't inspired by Shaykh al-Waeli because I don't think I even had the level to go that further into understanding his. I was more inspired by an oratory of a Mullah Asghar or an oratory of a Shaykh Abdul Hamid Kishk. So the oratory is what inspires me. But then as I start reading more, I appreciate Waeli more. And then when you listen to Waeli break an ayah down, I remember, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, لن تنالوا البر حتى تنفقوا مما تحبون وما تنفقوا من شيء فإن الله به عليم. The first part we always quote it on Mimbar. You never quote the last part. لن تنالوا البر حتى تنفقوا مما تحبون. You'll never achieve righteousness until you give away that which you love the most. We always hear this.
Yeah.
وما تنفقوا من شيء فإن الله به عليم. And when you do give away something, Allah knows the niyyah behind why you gave away. I have never heard a more profound explanation of that verse than Waeli's explanation. The way Waeli breaks down what is bir and what is the reasons for giving and what are the intentions behind giving is a profound lecture. And so you had earlier asked me what is the appeal.
Yeah.
The oneness of topic was something unique now on the pulpit. You now had a speaker who was going to stay on point for an hour rather than one who began a lecture, akhlaq, then God's existence, then back to parents, then akhlaq, then Imam. And by the end you're like, Mawla, I really don't know what your topic was. It was nice, but what was your, and that's why he becomes unique.
So it's very content heavy. Was any of his works published?
Yeah, so
because clearly, I mean, this is some published. I mean, if he's put
his
this much
lectures
effort
are
into understanding the Quran, there must. I mean, did he publish anything to this effect? Or?
So the work on prisons and Islamic law is published. The work on Shia ideology and Aqidah is published. Then you've got his poetry, which is
his diwan.
Diwans are published. I think Al-Turayhi has major discussions of his poetry. You have him teaching Quran tafsir at Al-Jami' Al-Islamiyya, if you remember in the UK, where Ayatollah Milani,
of course,
formed by, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Sayyid Muhammad Ali Shahristani.
Yes.
In 1987-88, he teaches tafsir. And now in Iraq, all over Iraq, all his lectures have been written.
It's taqrirat,
All of them are written, word for word. So, a lot of these are available for people to buy.
So let's just kind of wrap up here with his legacy. Has he left any students? I mean, if we were to look around at the Arab-speaking manabir of the Shia world now, is there anyone that you could say was close to Shaykh Ahmad al-Waeli or was kind of continuing in his tradition, or it's just generally everyone was really affected by him? Did he have any particular students, successors?
Yeah, there's always been people muted as successors. I think probably the most famous one also because of similarity of voice is Shaykh Fadl al-Maliki.
Oh, okay.
Who now is a marja in Qom.
Yeah.
And also has the uniqueness of being marja, but also gives majalis, a khatib. So more often than not, it would be Shaykh Fadl al-Maliki would be muted as his successor. In terms of others, I cannot categorically state because you don't really have ma'had khitaba, although now Sheikh Faisal al-Kadhimi has started a ma'had khitaba in the honor of Waeli. And we, of course, have the Shaykh Ahmad al-Waeli public speaking course at the institute. But I cannot say that there's definitely students direct of the Shaykh. I'd say that he was very helpful to his contemporaries. If you look at people like Abu Abd al-Muttalib, Sheikh Yusuf Dixon, you look at Sheikh al-Shahrudi, Sayyid Hadi al-Mudarrisi, Sheikh Fadl al-Maliki, Sheikh Baqir al-Maqdisi, Sheikh Jabir Aghai, some from the Kashi family and others. These were people he would help get majalis. So he'd tell people, listen, invite so-and-so. But I don't recall that he ever taught khataba to anybody. But if you're looking at a number of mashayikh until today, could comfortably go up and give a lecture where they've copied and pasted a Waeli lecture. At the end of the day, if you give credit,
I guess when someone is so prolific as he was, it's almost as if nearly everyone has been touched by him in some way in the Iraqi Shia speaking, world.
When the
I mean, in terms
Iraqi
of the Ahlul Manabir.
When the Iraqi Shia were facing persecution in the 80s, where they couldn't have majalis because of the Ba'ath regime, they used to listen to the Iran radio. And on the Iran radio, they'd play Waeli's lectures.
I've heard the same thing.
Us going to the mosque as children, there'd be a bag of cassettes of Waeli right at the front.
Amazing.
Your dad would take out the cassette in the old cassette recorder system, and you'd listen to Waeli. For me, subhanallah, how the world works. I said to you earlier, my mother was pregnant with me, and she goes to listen to Waeli's lectures in Kuwait when he'd lecture. You have the Husseiniya or the Imam Barga. Outside of it, you would sit in cars like a drive-through cinema. My parents would switch on the radio so the frequency picks up the microphone. And I think in Pakistan, if I'm not mistaken, they have this as well, where you can sit outside the majlis
and listen to the majlis
And little did I know that years later, you'd be doing something similar. So many people were inspired. And when Ayatollah al-Khomeini and Ayatollah al-Khoi are raving about the quality of your majlis, he has this story actually. He says, I was giving a lecture for Ayatollah al-Khoi. I was giving a lecture either for him or in his presence. And he goes, there was a hadith that I was quoting about Imam al-Hadi, the 10th of the Ithna Ashariyah, 12 Shia Imams. He said, I hadn't checked the chain of the narrations. And he goes, really do I do that? And he goes, who is in my lecture? And he goes, who is listening? And every point that I'm making, who is like, subhanallah, mashallah. And he goes, as he's saying that, I'm thinking, you clearly know all of this. And you're saying, subhanallah, mashallah. Shows a tawadu of Ayatollah al-Khoi. He goes, I finished the lecture, I went and sat next to him. He goes to me, very good lecture, Shaykh Ahmad. He goes, thank you so much. He goes, the hadith about on Imam al-Hadi, you check the chain or no? He's like, the seventh person in the chain is someone probably questionable, so try not to narrate it another time. And he's just like, it's just straight away clockwork. And I think his heart breaks that he can't go back to Iraq. And he constantly writes poetry about Iraq, Karbala. His poem is on the wall of the entrance to Imam al-Husayn's haram. Imam al-Rada's haram. Jawahiri has the poetry on Imam al-Husayn's haram. But Shaykh al-Waeli, if I'm not mistaken, he has the poem on the entrance to Imam al-Rada's haram. And his dream when he finds out he has cancer is there any way that I could go back to visit Karbala? Lo and behold, going through intense chemotherapy, and the news comes that Saddam Hussein's government has fallen.
Wow.
And in the last week of his life, he gets taken to Iraq. And he's like, just let me visit the shrine. And he's very unwell. And they take him, and then you'll see the footage is all online. And I'm sure some of our viewers will have some of these clips where they'll see that he's lying back in his bed, and he's realizing these are his last moments, and that God destined for him.
In Iraq, so he returns now.
Returns. He is in Kadmain, and Saddam has fallen. He returns to Iraq. As soon as Saddam falls, he lives for a week or so, or around. Someone may correct me, and then he passes away. He passes away. His funeral procession started in Kadmain in Baghdad and ended up in Kumail in Kufa.
Kufa, Kumail ibn Ziyad, yeah.
His coffin.
The Tashayya, yani. All the way from Baghdad to Najaf. Wow. Because there was every Iraqi, one way or the other, would hear his voice, would recognize his voice. And he wished to be buried next to Kumail bin Ziyad in Hannana. My grandfather, Sayyid Murtada Nakshawani, is buried there. You've also got Sheikh Muhammad Ali al-Irawani is buried there. It's a famous graveyard.
And Shaykh Ahmad al-Waeli is buried there. His grave becomes a place where many people have asked God for their hajat or their needs to be fulfilled through him. And so many have written what happened when they asked through him.
So there's this whole kind of aura of I guess what people call heresy of hagiography, but other people would say miracles.
Miracles, yeah.
Around this person who is now passed.
Yes. I've seen written there, I asked God through the supplication of mentioning Waeli's name, I had a child.
Amazing.
I converted, I became this, I changed, I learned, my kids, this. The stories are endless. And I really advise people out there, Muslim, who understand Arabic, of whatever denomination or background you are, go and listen to Waeli's Arabic lectures. Honestly, he never goes above an hour. And this is something also unique. His lectures always are between 45 to 52, 53. He won't go above that. Ayatollah Munir Khabbaz says, I lectured in front of him in the early 90s, I think, and I went above an hour to like hour 15. And when I came down, I said to him, what are you doing? Just get to the point and conclude it. People can't, not here to sit for an hour, 15 minutes. And he goes, I learned from that day that, you know what? So, meticulous, but loved, and ends up with a funeral procession that you can see on YouTube. Listen, Baghdad, all the way to Najaf, to have every human come out and touch your janazah, your tashiyah, highlights just how much love there is. And that's why now there's Shaykh Ahmad al-Waeli Street, Shaykh Ahmad al-Waeli Institute, Shaykh Ahmad al-Waeli book, Shaykh Ahmad al-Waeli Kadmain. As soon as you enter the haram, on the loudspeaker, before salah and adhan, everything, Waeli's lectures are playing. What a legacy.
Well, hopefully we can have more academic scholarship about his life, historical context, his legacy. I think it would be not only a riveting story, but an important contribution. Maybe there is already stuff out there, but I haven't seen any substantial monograph on that subject. But hopefully we can leave some of that work to you to maybe produce something in the future. Because I think this is absolutely important. I mean, often the history, and I'll just end on this note. The history of Shi'ism is often a sad history, and there are sad moments, and there's all kinds of tragedies that have occurred. But I think from time to time, a figure that's so prolific that
my work is in progress, inshallah, and it will be published hopefully soon on lessons from Shaykh Ahmad al-Waeli's life. I know that Said Ja'far Baraka in Najaf has recently translated a series of lectures or transcribed a series of Shaykh Waeli's lectures when he came to London and lectured in Dar al-Islam. So the work continuously, whether in Arabic or in English, people are still working on Shaykh al-Waeli's lectures.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Dr.
My pleasure.
Nakshawani, for joining us.
Thank you. God bless.
Thank you, and thank you to all our viewers for joining us all the way up to the end here. And And join us sometime at our office, even here at the University of Toronto in the Toronto School of Theology. And check us out again on YouTube. If you like our content, think of supporting the SRI, the Shia Research Institute, so we can produce more quality content. Thank you very much.